Hello and welcome to Keepers of Humanity. We are delighted to bring you the voices of indigenous wisdom keepers, spiritual guides, healers, shamans, artists, revolutionaries, and visionaries who hold the keys, codes, wisdom, and secrets that are needed now to give you access to the eternal cosmic consciousness, to guide you in ways to break free from old stagnant patterns and transform them into new perceptions of what is possible here in the miracle realm of earth, so that together we can construct a bright and vibrant future with its foundation solidly rooted in love, compassion, joy, and truth. I'm Dr. Marie Mbouni, and I'll be your host and guide for this interview. And today I'm delighted to present Yannick Dubois. Yannick followed his calling for authentic, nature based spirituality and shamanic initiations from a very early age. He inhabits a yurt in the woods on the edge of Dartmoor Nature Reserve in Devon, where he lives close to the earth and in sync with the seasons. He works full time as a self employed shamanic artist and workshop leader with a special focus on tree wisdom. He was initially trained as a social worker and kindergarten educator. He weaves elements of psychology, creative practices, and storytelling into his unique offerings. Under the name Forest Heart, Yannick has been sharing his creative offerings with a wide audience at retreats, conscious festivals, and online events for several years. Hello, Yannick, and welcome here.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for introducing me so beautifully.
Today, we are going to talk about trees as guardians and ancestors of humanity, embodied wisdom of our green kin. And I want to dive right in. Could you please tell us, how did you first discover your connection to trees?
Yes, so the trees have always been an important part of my life. In fact, one of the earliest memories that I can recall is being in a baby carriage in the woods looking up at the canopy and the light shining through the leaves. I was part of a Boy Scouts group and we went out into the woods every week. And whenever my parents took me on a walk in the forest, I used to run off the path towards the oldest trees, and I got these transmissions from certain trees that were in my surroundings. And my father is a carpenter, so I learned a little bit on the practical ways of working with wood. With our family name being Dubois, which is French, and it means of the wood or of the forest. So I feel it from an early age. It's been kind of in my field and in my ancestry, this relationship to the trees and the wood and the lifestyle that comes with it. And at the age of 12, my love for the forest was so strong that I was determined to become a forest guard. And this meant for me leaving my family home and going into a boarding school where I would not see my family and friends for 5 days every week, and to learn a completely new language because I had to go and live in a different country. But still, I was determined to go to the specialized school for forestry training. Because at that time, stepping into puberty, I was determined But if there's a school that can allow me to spend some of my time outside and in the forest, then that's where I want to go. And this is also when I discovered that on my solitary walks, like after school walks, our school was surrounded by woodland. And I would often go by myself, and I'd go and sit by the stream and sit under certain trees. And I would just feel the different qualities of the land. And for a very long time, I thought that everyone would be having the same experience, where I felt that the waters and the stones and the moss and the trees and the light and the wind was all communicating with me in a way that didn't require any words. And that's really what sparked off my journey. And later on, I found out that there are many people like me who commune with nature in that way. And it's inherent that everyone can actually learn it. So in the last 9 years, I've lived here in England to study in the Celtic traditions and Druidry in particular, because the tree wisdom and the tree knowledge is a big part of the Druidic lineage and tradition. The word Druid itself is composed of two pieces, Dru and Weed, where Dru means the tree or the oak, and Weed means wisdom or knowing. So it's right at the heart of the tradition that wisdom of the trees or the knowledge of the oak.
Wow, what a fascinating story, and also your courage and determination and commitment to what you felt was your call at such a young age. And I've experienced what you were talking about. In one of my lineages, my teachers took me to England to study the trees and the Druidic culture. And I remember the first tree we visited was the Bothorp Oak. You know that, I don't know if you've been there, and being able to enter, through that hole on that oak, I had mystical experiences. And it's truly something that you cannot describe. And in our walks, there were like bluebells um, that were communicating with me. So this is so powerful and healing. And I'm really happy that you are here, to impart this wisdom with us. And I wanted to ask you, in what ways do you consider trees to be keepers of humanity?
So a couple of years ago, I was working more intensely with a theme of personal protection, and I was asking myself, who are my guardians, who are my guides? And then I expanded the question into asking, who are the guardians and the keepers and the guides of all of humanity? Because I felt that if we have them individually, then also places and countries and continents and planets have their own guardians and keepers as well. And initially, as I was contemplating this question, I thought of the ascended masters and the angels and dragon beings and extraterrestrial forces and star nations. And all of this felt really beautiful to me. But then it dawned at me that there's also much closer to home. There are these beings all around me that are our guardians and protectors on a practical level and on a spiritual level as well. And these, for me, are the trees and also the animals, of course, with all that they bring into our lives. But the trees in particular, they, because they are so grounded, they are always there in the same places. So where the animals tend to run away from us And the more subtler dimensions, we need to be in the right state of mind to be able to communicate with masters and angels. But the trees, we can walk up to them in our bodies and we can meet them, and they have this generosity of being available for us. And they're in abundance, so they're all over the world and everyone has access to them. So for me, that was my personal answer, not excluding any of the other things that I mentioned, but to just really feel how strongly the trees are looking after us. They have even shaped our body. I mean, if you look at our hand, this way our thumb is positioned is co-evolved with the branches that we've been holding on to and our ancestors have been holding on to for millions of years. So our hands are a reflection of our ancestors holding on to branches. And this is why the thumb is positioned in that particular shape that we share a lot of with a lot of the more intelligent monkeys and apes as well. And not just that, but the trees have given us a sense of home for millions of years. They give us shelter, they give us tools, they give us the weapons that we needed for hunting, like the spears, the bows, the arrows, but also the wood for the fires. And not just the fire as in the actual wood that is burning, but also the fire by friction with a drill bow, for example, like traditional ways of lighting fires that involve rubbing wood against each other to create a spark. So the technology of fire, which is really seen as the original technology of humanity that sparked of all other technological developments, like that secret of that first spark of fire is right inside the wood. It's hidden inside the wood. And that act of magic, of transmuting, of creating an element, the fire, like the water just moves through us, the air just moves through us. We don't create it. So the trees have given us the secret of being able to unlock the fire as a technology from within its own body, within its own wood. So for me, these things are very profound. And it just doesn't end because we also have food and medicine from trees, as well as transportation, like the first wheels were made out of wood, boats and ships made out of wood. So they've allowed us to have a place to protect ourselves, to gather and harvest food, to make baskets, containers, even shoes made out of barks. So there's hardly any area that is not impacted by the trees, even all the way down to language and symbols. If you go more into a less tangible realm, in German, for example, the word for the letter in the alphabet is Buchstabe, and Buchenstäbe literally means the sticks of the beech tree. So the patterns in the branches of the trees also inspired our ancestors to create magical systems of writing, like the runes and the tree ogham in the Celtic lands. And the amount of beauty and inspiration and holding that we have felt from those beings, it's just a vast resource that we can all learn to tap into.
Mm. I'm just absorbing all the wisdom that you just brought to us. And, um, one of the things that we use today is paper. And trees were really like the element that we first used for paper. I love the way that you really dissect the different ways that trees are protectors, guardians, and keepers of humanity, and also the fact that they are around us and they have been around us for thousands of years and they are accessible. One of the things that, when I work with clients and, we work on meditation or altered states, they like, oh, I can't do that. I can't go into different states of consciousness. I don't really know what star nations mean. And you said something really important here, which is that we can access trees. They are here. We can walk up to them, and their generosity, like there is no tree that will say no, you can't touch me or you cannot hug me. So thank you for bringing those reminders, because it is so easy to forget the benevolence of these trees, the wisdom of these trees that are here for us. Yeah, yeah. It brings so many memories of all the healings and transmissions I've received myself from trees. And I wanted to get more practical as well. Could you give us some examples of what we can actually learn from trees?
Yes, I love talking about this topic. Um, yeah, so in most of the world mythologies, we find this theme of a sacred tree, or the tree of life, like in the Norse mythology, Yggdrasil, who connects all the different worlds. And there's just such a rich tapestry of ways that the trees feature in very deep, meaningful stories and practices. So one of the most obvious things that many people will feel, especially in relation to older trees, is how our lifespan is put into perspective in relation to a much older being. And especially here in England, we have the yew trees, and some of them get up to 5,000 years old. So they are among the oldest living organisms and beings in, in all of Europe. And meditating, or even just being there, even without having the intention to meditate, people will naturally drop into a different sense of themselves and whatever is going on for us at any particular time or day in relation to that being that was already there before the Romans invaded the British Isles. So the trees are like living libraries of wisdom, and some of them have just seen so much, especially the older ones. And then we can bring this to our body, where our own nervous system resembles a tree. So, and not just our nervous system, but also the lungs, and we have these branching patterns. And similar to a tree, our bodies and our nervous systems form this bridge between heaven and earth. And whenever we forget how to do this, the tree is just such a potent reminder that we can connect in both directions, and we need strong roots to stretch out our branches, and that we grow equally in both directions. And the stronger we are connected to the earth, and the more we can reach out to the cosmic dimensions of life. And in a way, each tree and each different type of tree, like each tree individually has a message, just in the way that it is in life, if it's young or old, or if it's wounded, or if it's healthy, or depending on what it's doing within the season and the cycle. But also each different type of tree holds a different medicine or different archetype. And I'm going to illustrate this in a minute. So just like the planets in astrology have these different characters, like Venus and the goddess of love, and Mars and the fiery warrior energy, in the same way, each tree holds its own unique transmission that is similar across all the trees of one type. So for example, the birch tree is a pioneering tree. It's white because it exposes itself to the sunlight whenever a forest is expanding into a surrounding area, let's say after the last ice ages, when the ice was melting, the birch trees kind of advance into this new territory. So they expose themselves to a lot of light, and their white bark reflects the light. So they're protecting themselves against sunburn. And they also let a lot of light shine through their crown because other species are supposed to be able to grow very well under the birch tree. So it doesn't claim all the light for itself. And each tree in turn will have slightly different specializations. The alder tree, for example, is specialized to grow in water, in marshlands, and in even on riverbanks and in areas that get flooded. And its wood becomes harder when it stands in water, where other trees would rot. And then we can look at this not just on the physical plane, but also on an energetic and spiritual plane. What does this mean for us to be able to stand submerged and be able to stand our ground within this flowing energy of the right by the rivers and where the waters of the emotions move, for example. So each tree in turn has its own particular medicine that is obvious in the way it looks, like right down to the grain of the actual wood, but also in the energy that we feel when we enter the energetic bubble of a particular tree. And the more consciously we enter into a tree's energy field, the more willingly it will share its energy with us. And all of the different trees combined, they're a bit like the deities of a pantheon. And to give another few examples, the oak tree, for example, is a symbol of strength and loyalty. And the actual wood of the tree is very strong. So some of the ships that have been built 400-500 years ago, they're out of oak wood. They're still in the ocean now, and they're still in a great condition because the wood is so strong. But in comparison, we have the willow, for example, that is very easy to break, but it has a whole other form of strength. Its strength is in its flexibility, in, let's say, where it's used for weaving. But also we can cut off a little branch of the willow, stick it into the ground, and it will root straight away and grow back from its own, from even just a tiny branch. So it has like, the willow strength is a much more softer version of strength, where it doesn't have this rigidity of a single tree with one big trunk. It usually has like many offshoots, and it has this strength in numbers and this strength in flexibility. So when we learn about the trees and the different properties, we can always ask ourselves that, what does this teach me about myself? Like, do I need a bit more of that oak medicine of standing in my sovereignty? Or do I need to learn to be a bit more like the willow and allow myself to fall apart because I trust that force of regeneration from deep inside? And so the trees can like teach us certain principles of life and adaptation, because each one of those different species had millions of years to adapt in an evolutionary process. So us as humanity needing to adapt in the current times that we're in and being under so much pressure, when we look at the trees, we look at beings that have adapted to millions of years of change on this planet successfully. And the strategies that they have found are the same strategies that they are embodying right now.
I just want to repeat that trees have been here for eons, and they have been subjected to different experiences, pressure, wounds, disasters, catastrophes, and they have developed strategies. where they can thrive. They are alive. And I love the parallels that you are showing us, which are not only looking at trees as different beings, but opening to emulating the teachings that they have for us, opening up to receiving their wisdom. Um, as you were talking about the oak and the willow, it really inspired me in my own life. And I love what you say, which is that we have access to different medicines for the different times in our lives. Sometimes we need to stand in our sovereignty, and sometimes we need to surrender. We need to be flexible and open to possibility. Thank you so much for that. And Yannick, I wanted to ask you if, um, this question, which is, what can our listeners do to attune themselves to the wisdom of the trees? Because these days we are all in such a fast pace when we don't have the access to nature that you have. How can we do this?
Yeah, I will speak to that more now. One of the things that I want to point out also is that the trees that I'm mentioning are the trees that actually grow around me. So if I was to live in a different country, and if I would be spending the time to get to know the trees around me in the jungle or in the Middle East or in any other like climatic zone, they would also hold their own teachings and wisdom that are also relevant to that landscape and the people who live there. And because this has been done for a very, very long time, this learning from the trees, it is something that naturally connects us back with our ancestry as well and the places that we live in. To give you an example, if I suddenly had 100 ancestors of mine turn up at my doorstep and they asked me to have a look at my life, and they're coming from all these different times, from medieval Europe to all the way back to Africa and anything in between. And I would show them my life. I would show them my phone, and they'd be very confused. They wouldn't understand what it is. It's a black shiny thing that makes sounds, and it would be completely confusing. If I showed them the clothes I wear, they would probably understand them, but still they would ask themselves what it's made of and how it got to be the way it is. But if I showed my ancestors an oak leaf, every single one of those 100, like if you live in the northern hemisphere, every one of those 100 ancestors would recognize that oak leaf, and you can be sure that they would have seen that leaf with exactly the same leaf shape with their own eyes when they were alive, even 100,000 years ago. And they would have known like the flavor and the taste of powdered acorns that were made into acorn flour and acorn bread. And so by stepping into this tradition, it's not actually something foreign that we're introducing. It's more like we're making sure that something gets continued that has been there. So if we forget about the trees, we would literally be the first generation who wouldn't understand those the significance and the symbolism and so on. And actually here in England, the Oxford Children's Dictionary a few years ago has decided to remove certain words from the Children's Dictionary because they thought that they are not relevant anymore. And among those words, for example, were the acorn and the catkin, which is on the trees, the little seed cones where the seeds fall out of. And instead they introduced words to the children's dictionary like chat room, for example. And I think one thing that we can all do to keep trees relevant is just to make sure that we learn the words, that we learn the names, that we learn how to identify and recognize the trees that are around us. And even if we just know the most common 5 or the most common 10, we're helping important knowledge not to get lost. So this is one thing that I always encourage, is to actually for people to familiarize themselves with the trees, around them. And what I like to do myself is not just to learn the facts about the trees, because it can be tempting to just go around and say, this is a birch and this is a hazel and this is an ash tree. And then we believe, because we have the name, that we know what we are talking about. Where actually the name is just the beginning. It's like meeting a new friend. We usually introduce each other or introduce ourselves and we shake hands and we say our name, but we don't just leave it there. So once you know someone's name or we become familiar, it's really about creating that relationship. And the best way of doing that is by actually making time to go out and spend time with the trees outside. And that could be even in a city, there could be a park, there could be the front garden. And also if there are no trees, to plant a tree can be very rewarding in itself, to actually make space for a little tree to grow somewhere. I think we all know how important the trees are in general for the climate on our planet, and stabilizers of soil, preventing of soil erosion. And that's something that is deeply meaningful whenever I participate in tree planting events. I do feel this strong bond between people, to just in the simplicity of planting, there's something inherently meaningful, because we can become caretakers of this planet as well, and not just expect from other keepers of humanity to look after us, but also for ourselves to step into that role co-creatively with those beings. And the trees really lend themselves for that, because a lot of them are not very demanding. Some of them can grow in very poor soil conditions. I'm sure there will be a tree that is specialized to the area that you're in. So these are just some of the things that I recommend. And on a more energetic, meditative level, there are a few exercises that I like to share that maybe after listening to this conversation that we're recording today, that listeners can take out and practice. One of them is to stand on the ground barefoot and actually visualizing those roots of the nervous system extending into the soil and connecting up through the nervous system up into the branches. And we can use our hands on the in-breath to expand the branches, and on the exhale to bring like the sap of that tree sap that we are tuning into to rise and fall. And that's not just grounding and an earthing practice for our electromagnetic field to rebalance itself, but it's also a way of tuning in with this message that the trees have, because they don't move, which means that wherever they are, they're making the best of any given situation that they're in. And that in itself is a superpower that we can really learn to tune into, because a lot of the time we're trying to fix things, you're running around in all different directions. But looking at a tree, even if the seed falls in a crack in the concrete, it will still send roots down, crack the concrete open, and start sprouting. Even in the harshest conditions, the trees give their best. And by doing that simple standing meditation, we can do something very similar and just stand somewhere for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and just choose to be in one spot and not to run away. And then when we actually meet the tree in the gardens or parks or forests that we have access to, there's a beautiful way of breathing with the trees, which is based on this understanding of our exchange of oxygen. So when we exhale, the tree inhales our carbon monoxide, and as the tree exhales its oxygen, we inhale the oxygen. So there's a symbiotic relationship through the breath that we can tune into when we're spending time with the tree. So you can either just sit or lie down under a tree, or put your hands on the trunk. I often like to ask for permission as well from the tree if I'm welcome there. And then just to stay with this breath of reciprocity. As I give, the tree receives, and as the tree gives, I receive. And those things in themselves can become very useful ways of transferring the feeling state that we experience to other relationships that we have with animals and people and friends and places. But because of the relationship to the actual air and the oxygen in our lungs, that I find it so fascinating that themselves look like trees. It's a very simple way of doing something very profound. And also in the last 5 years, I've created a whole library of resources for people in the form of artwork and online workshops for people to learn more about the trees. So this picture here behind me is a picture that's dedicated to the alder tree. And I usually spend a good 2-3 months with each different type of tree to go and visit it, write about the tree, do botanical studies, observations. And the reason why I call this shamanic art, because I actually invite the tree to draw through me. So my prayer is I offer my eyes and my hands to the tree to express itself through me. And this is also something that we can all do, like as a way of giving back to all that we receive from the trees, is to offer our creativity. And that could be through writing or drawing, but that could also be through singing, or any expression if it comes from that intentional place of giving back.
Beautiful. I almost found myself in tears I'm so touched by everything that you are sharing with us. It's so profound and yet so simple and accessible. You don't have to buy any equipment to be with a tree. Um, it's it's a reminder, it's an invitation for us to remember that we actually do have a symbiotic relationship with trees, and they are taking care of us every day. And, taking a moment even to express gratitude, a few seconds, as you're driving, as you're walking by, a few seconds in front of a tree. Thank you. Thank you, grandmother tree, grandfather tree, little brother tree, little sister tree. So powerful. I will really remember these practices that sometimes I forget a lot of times. And I let myself be distracted sometimes with busyness. And so I really want to honor these teachings that you bring that will make all of us keepers of humanity, and in collaboration and co creation with our trees, the green king. Mm. I want to shift gears a little bit here. Yannick, you prepared something really special for our audience that will help them really go a little deeper. It's a free gift that you all going to be able to access and learn from. So, could you tell us a little more about the free gift you have for our audience?
Yes, my pleasure. I love doing this work, and I see it as my service of giving back for all that I have received from the trees, and to just keep this going in the spirit of generosity, which is something that the trees embody so much, and I'm thriving for as well. So my gift for the listeners is access to one of my workshops, which is called the Inner Forest Grow, in which I take the participants on a guided journey with the drum to find a forest and create the forest inside of themselves using a medicine wheel template with the 4 directions and a different tree guardian in each direction. So this is a beautiful way for you to familiarize yourself with the inner aspect of working with the trees, which can then also enhance our experience when we go back out into the landscape. And the trees that I've chosen for this journey are the birch tree, the oak, the willow, and the yew tree, with the birch being the tree of new beginnings, the oak tree, the tree of the sacred masculine, the willow, the tree of the sacred feminine, and the yew tree, the tree of the ancestors, and the portal of death and rebirth. So with this powerful combination of those 4, you can start on a much deeper level straight away. So, and then I have individual workshops that I offer as part of my work for each one of those trees individually. I have a 2-hour journey, like a 1-hour meditation, and an hour-long PowerPoint where I go into all of the botany and history, practical uses, herbal medicine, as well as the more energetic spiritual sides. But the gift is very much like an introduction, and it also stands for itself. So that there's a starting point for people to, hopefully remember many beautiful and important things.
Mm. Thank you so much, Yannick. I can tell you that I have journeyed with these specific trees. Um, One of my most powerful experiences in nature during one of my shamanic teachings and learnings was a journey of death and rebirth with the yew tree. It was, it changed my life. And so I hope that you can access this gift, beautiful, generous gift from Yannick, and experience this for yourself. Yannick, we are so honored and just delighted that you are able to come on and share with us here at Keepers of Humanity. We are grateful for what you're doing in the world in helping us remember the wisdom of the trees. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for having me. Many bright blessings to you and everyone listening.
Bright blessings to everyone, and see you next time.